Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of NeuroShockMount. For today's episode, we have our guest, Don Dees. He is the founder and chief instructor of Modern Martial Arts and Family Fitness Center in Clarksville, Tennessee. That's near Fort Campbell, home of the 101st Airborne Division. Coach Don teaches Jiu-Jitsu and Kickboxing at his school. He's emphasizing techniques designed for real-world physical altercations. Before beginning his study of Jiu-Jitsu, Coach Don earned a black belt in karate and studied the Korean art of Hwa Rang Do and Aikido. In the U.S. Army, he trained in combatives. Coincidentally, his Jiu-Jitsu professor, Matt Larsen, who you guys will be introduced to in another episode, he created the Modern Army Combatives program. So let's take a few moments and get to know Don. Hey, Don, how are you?
Very well, thanks. And you?
I'm fantastic. I'm excited about the opportunity of interviewing you. I think you're amazing.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that, and I look forward to sharing some of my insight.
Yeah, definitely. So the listening audience has a little background. Do you remember how did we meet? You want to say a little bit about that?
Gosh, so I don't remember the year because everything seems like it was last year lately.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's hard to believe that my last trip to Iraq began more than 10 years ago. So
I think it was like in 2008, maybe.
Yeah, I was teaching as an adjunct instructor at the Defense Information School, and we encountered each other through that experience.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And then we crossed paths again at Fort Belvoir, and were able to interact there as well. So, which was exciting. Okay, so today, tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about.
So one of the things that is on the minds of lots of folks these days is how to move forward after trauma. And, my experience is centered around veterans and active service members who have experienced it. And so I know that within the community of veterans, lots of people are turning to the art of jiu-jitsu as part of their strategy for recovery. So talking a little bit about how jiu-jitsu plays into that and why it's effective for that particular group, and how the same attributes could benefit others experiencing post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so now you have a history as far as, were you in the military for 20 plus years? How many years were you in the military?
Yeah, so I have about 23 years of service. Currently a member of the individual ready reserve, but I've been in all components of the Army. I've been active duty, I've been National Guard, and I've been reserve. So many and varied experiences throughout the different components.
Excellent. Okay. Now, one thing that really stood out to me, when we have visited over the years, I really love your concept of the mind, body, spirit tribe, and how that's directly related to helping veterans as they adapt, when they're going back into the civilian world. So tell us a little bit about the 3 steps that we're going to go through today that will help soldiers and civilians alike adapt to our new world post-COVID.
Yeah, so let's look primarily at what we mean by mind, body, spirit, and tribe to give people a little context for that. So there's a shift within the fitness industry to treat fitness as a component of overall wellness. So we want to address multiple aspects of a person's life in order to help them achieve the greatest level of wellness possible. And so the first of those is the mind. So what is our mental capacity for being well in the world and in the environment in which we live? So then there's the body. And of course, that's where a lot of the fitness emphasis has been in the past, where we're going to emphasize exercise and diet and nutrition. So that's where the body comes into play. And then when we talk about spirit, there is this religious or spiritual aspect to living that is often overlooked when we try to address the overall concept of wellness. And what I mean by that is not everyone has a relationship with a deity. So not everyone believes in a god or a specific entity or being that is sort of celestial in most religions where people think of it that way. But there is also a connectedness to the world in general, sort of a like a harmonious existence within our physical bounds that kind of transcends that. And then when we talk about tribe, that's the social aspect of wellness. And one of the ways that people are able to achieve the highest level of wellness is to have a good support system around them, whether that be close friends or family or other entities or groups that comprise their daily interactions. And if you don't have a good tribe in your mix of wellness, then you're going to be lacking in the degree of overall well-being that you can achieve. So when we look at mind, body, spirit, and tribe, those are the quadrants that we need to address in order to get to that best level or best version of ourselves.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true. I love how you're combining, how we have needs psychologically, socially, and then also, the tribal aspect of it, and how it's really important to have that foundation physiologically, So as we're talking about how we can move forward as a tribe, right, and strengthen ourselves individually, let's talk a little bit about stress control, okay? And then also you had mentioned that factor of social disconnection. So we know what the problems are. Help me better understand the solutions. What does that look like? And if you have some personal experiences to share so we can kind of relate to that, I would love to hear that as well.
So when we talk about stress control, this is a tremendous issue because stress and anxiety have manifestations within the body which deteriorate the physical health. So something that's going on mentally is having a negative impact on the body. And so we know that sometimes the body, in a reaction to stress, manufactures more of a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is a contributing factor to inability to lose weight and even weight gain. So that's definitely something we want to try to control for. And so there have been studies, and the National Institute of Health on their website has a listing of many of these different studies. But one in particular that I was sort of drawn to was a Scandinavian nation study, I believe it was Sweden, where they looked at a number of participants, and then there was the active group and then the control group, which they both went through certain kinds of therapies, but the study group went through a fairly intensive physical fitness regimen where they were going through a certain set of exercises, and they were targeting getting a certain number of active minutes per day and having that happen every day throughout the week. And at the end of the study, they found that those people who were in the study group achieved a higher degree of overall wellness compared to the control group, which didn't focus on the physical aspect. So we know that physical activity can have a positive impact in stress control. So everyone has sort of their different affinities, right? I personally am averse to the notion of running when no one is chasing me or lifting heavy things simply to put them back down. So, running and weightlifting are not my thing. I don't enjoy them. I don't want it. I know they're good for us. I know they have a positive impact on us, but if the mode of exercise isn't engaging, isn't interesting, isn't fun, then we aren't going to do it. And I remember as a young kid, having neighborhood friends and cousins, and the common activity was to just get out in the backyard and play fight and wrestle, and the just joy of rolling around with another human being and engaging in this sort of play fight, right,
Right.
was a joyous thing. Well, here at 52 years old, I get to do that same thing every day in a controlled environment, with a curriculum behind it in order to learn new skills and techniques. And we call it jiu-jitsu. Some people call it pajama wrestling, in a joking manner, or
Right.
involuntary yoga. But
Or in the rain, it's mud wrestling, right?
right, exactly. And with the Saharan dust coming in, we might have lots of mud wrestling. Um, but so jiu-jitsu is a great physical activity that allows you to interact with another person and put the body through stressful situations, but learn to mitigate them. And so as a purely exercise activity, it's great for physical fitness, but in terms of utility and learning adequate and effective self-defense, I believe it's just there's no compare. It's without comparison to other forms of self-defense.
I love that. Now, one thing that we've discussed also in past conversations, you talk about the importance of having a routine, where you're getting enough sleep. You're on point as far as the type of food that you're taking in to nourish your mind and your body. Also, then exercise like jujitsu, and then quiet contemplation. So, tell me a little bit about that routine and what you recommend not only for your clients, but just, for the people within your community that you have the opportunity to interact with.
Yeah, and so in terms of absolute truth in advertising, I have to admit that sleep hygiene is one of the daily struggles that I confront. When we don't get adequate sleep, our body doesn't recover adequately. So a lot of the restorative things that have to happen to the physical body as well as to our brain and the mental functions happen during sleep. So if we deprive our body of that good, deep REM sleep, then we don't recover adequately. So things like just recovering from wear and tear of the body that happens on a daily basis, or recovering from some kind of an injury, or just simply being able to relax the mind and be ready to greet the new day in a fresh and vibrant manner. Without adequate sleep, all of those things become difficult. Even weight loss can be stymied by not getting enough sleep. So for some folks, as they talk to me about their attempts to try to control their weight, and they talk to me about their diet, and they talk to me about their water intake and their activity levels, everything sounds great. Like we're doing the right things, but the pounds aren't coming off. Then we start to look at the sleep habits, and they're not getting adequate sleep. So it's, derailing all the other good things that they're doing because of that one aspect that's causing them some problems.
That really is so powerful. Yeah, we have a guest that will be on one of the episodes that we'll be talking about also the power of not only the REM sleep, but then finding ways to be in parasympathetic dominance, because our society is really set up to have people running in their sympathetic nervous system. So they're constantly in fight or flight. Okay. And then, on top of that, you have veterans that are in that state because they've been deployed multiple times and they've been in war zones. So it's like we have those battles to fight as well when we're just trying to get a good night's sleep, or, just trying to be peaceful in our waking moments as well. So I love that you mentioned that. It's very powerful.
Yeah. And when you talk about quiet contemplation, some people are turned off by the term meditation, but if we just set aside some time each day to just let our minds be restful and let our bodies be at peace as we do that, then taking these pauses will give us sometimes a revitalization throughout the day, so we can re-energize and then go tackle those more difficult challenges after being somewhat restored. So, for people who have uh, people who struggle with anxiety, for people who are um, terminal procrastinators, there's some underlying psychological reasons for procrastination. Sometimes when we become anxious, we become so overwhelmed with the number of tasks or the size of tasks or our perception of the size of tasks that we can't move forward. And so sometimes you have to take that moment to take a, uh, hypothetical deep breath, as it were, and let it out, and then put your head down and do the work. But
Yes.
sometimes the mind is so overstimulated and saturated with concerns and thoughts that we can't address those daily tasks easily.
Oh, I love that. Now, the other element that just actually came to mind, and this is something that kind of came into my awareness from a conversation today that I had at the spa, with the owner of Solace Day Spa. She was saying, Lisa, sometimes I feel like we're playing this game where we think we have to get so much done because we're going to run out of time, and I think that that's something that happens not just for, a good majority of the people, but especially for people with PTSD. If they've lost loved ones or they've seen a life taken right in front of them, it changes the way that you approach your life, because you recognize that life is finite. So all of a sudden you're like, oh, let me cram all of this into my day. And it's a matter of being able to have proper time management skills, being able to manage the stress, and in being able to do that, then you can have clarity of mind and you can create a reasonable plan of action. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, so time is finite, and it is the one resource that we can't retrieve and we can't create more of. So I think rather than focusing on the fleeting nature of time, we have to devote our energies and our resources to those things which are the most important, the things that are going to make the most impact. And that's not for either of us to say for anyone else. We can only say that for ourselves. So, you can choose to be distracted by things that are happening in your external world that you can't control, or you can focus on the things that are important to you and you can control. So I think that's a difficult lesson for many of us, especially in a world of 24/7 social media, where it is so easy to get caught up in other people's priorities and sometimes overlook our own. So for me, I have a life mission that's tied very closely to running my school. And I feel like because I've been given this gift of jiu-jitsu, that it's important for me to spread the love of the art throughout the world. And so what I need to spend my waking hours doing is figuring out the best way to accomplish that. And when I stay focused on that in particular, I am at my most peaceful, right? So when I allow myself to be distracted by other people's priorities and get myself onto their agenda instead of to my own, that's when I start to feel stress. That's when I start to experience anxiety at the greatest levels. Now there are external factors that I have no control over. Every quarter when it's time for me to do my quarterly business taxes, I experience great deals of stress and anxiety. But it's a necessary evil in moving forward with what is my life purpose. So,
Absolutely.
there are things that we have to still do. There are things that are still going to occupy space in our mind, but we have to be able to compartmentalize and prioritize those things so that we understand where they fit in the bigger picture. I'm not defined by the expenses that I must incur on a monthly basis to operate the school. I'm defined by the number of people I can help.
That is powerful. I love that. Speaking of the people that you can help, it's not just about the adults, it's also about the kiddos. So what I love about your program is you've talked about, teaching kids the power of taking preventative measures, so that they're able to better understand their emotions and their responses to stress and how they can walk through that, and how powerful that is at such a young age to be able to learn those coping mechanisms so that later on in life they may not experience the same types of responses to trauma that we have, because maybe we didn't learn it as early as they did. So tell me a little bit about that program with you guys.
All grappling arts represent a great example of the broader aspects of life, right? So they're a great metaphor for the lives we live. As an example, so when you're practicing grappling moves, you're learning to subdue an opponent or an adversary. Sometimes you're working to simply escape from a submissive position to get to a dominant position, or you're trying to achieve a submission from a dominant position. So when you're a smaller person and there's a larger person on top of you holding you down, and you experience that in a controlled environment with a good plan and a good block of instruction of how to get out from there, when you learn how to do that, there's a simple, a sense of accomplishment and achievement that accompanies that. And so then as you grow and you develop into other aspects of your life, when you're faced with adversity, you can look at a daunting school assignment or a heavy work burden and know that you can do the things that you've been taught and trained to do to tackle that problem and move forward, because you've experienced physical adversity at a younger age. And you sort of develop this sense of, if I can do that, then I can do this. And it develops within kids this sense of purpose and helps them to have this, determination within themselves. And, one of the terms that comes to mind is resilience. Grappling arts help to develop resilience among their participants. And resilience is simply the characteristic of being able to grow and develop in the face of adversity, not simply to, survive, but to thrive, And so, we always talk about the old expression, coal doesn't become diamonds without pressure, right? So if you want to create a precious gem, you have to, give it a little bit of pressure. And that's what jiu-jitsu does for our kids, is it creates a little bit of pressure on them so that they can dig deep within themselves and find their way to grow and develop in that situation.
I love that. So instead of having them live in a bubble to try to protect them from the evils of the world, you teach them how to survive and thrive so that they're able to face adversity and win. I love that. Absolutely love that.
Yeah, so it's one of the things that jiu-jitsu does amazingly well. It's hard for people who haven't experienced it to really understand. And when you watch from the outside and you see, in my school, we start as young as 4. So when you see a couple of really young kids on the mat aggressively fighting each other, if you walk in the gym at that moment, you think, what are they teaching these kids to do? But then when the match is over and the winner helps the one who didn't win stand back up, and they hug, and then they walk off the mat holding hands with each other as friends.
Powerful. I love that.
We provide them an environment where they can safely engage in these activities, and they forge friendships that they probably wouldn't have otherwise, because the people who come together at a jiu-jitsu school come from all walks of life, and they may not encounter each other otherwise except for this opportunity to be together in this way.
I also love that they're able to interact in an authentic way, to where they're comfortable expressing real emotions that, you know, sometimes can be perceived as negative, you know. I think that's so powerful. With my kiddos, you know, I teach them it's okay to be angry, but it's a matter of being mindful during that moment where you can channel your energy properly. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to, you know, have real emotions. You don't have to bottle that up. And I think oftentimes, you know, we're taught that we're supposed to act like we're in some sort of, I don't know, television show, you know, we're maybe in a sitcom, and we have to bottle all of our emotions, and we can never really express how we really feel, you know, and that's so detrimental in so many ways. You know, it can lead to diseases, it can lead to mental issues, it can lead to not being able to have this sense of grit and resilience when you're faced with true adversity in life. You know, so I love that you're empowering people to feel comfortable with their emotions, and they're learning how to properly channel that. That's beautiful. It translates beautifully to the rest of their lives.
Yeah, win or lose, you know, when the kids finish a match, oftentimes they go up to the other, you know, to their opponent and say, thank you for a good match. You know, whether they win or lose, they appreciate the opportunity to have the competition, right? So we encourage that. And so we always tell the kids, the most important part of every match is at the end, where you shake each other's hands, you know, because that's a signal of respect and admiration for the other person, giving you the best version of them in that moment as a worthy opponent, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Now, in future conversations, I want to explore that more with you. You know, I think that martial arts is fascinating in that way, that they teach you about these principles or pillars to life, you know, that really focus on respect and honor and, you know, being able to confront adversity and become an overcomer, you know. So I want to explore that more with you. Today, I've really enjoyed talking with you about, you know, how Jiu-Jitsu can really transform lives. It can break people away from the social disconnection. It can help with developing the supportive routines that you need to be able to move past that trauma. What I'd love for you to do is tell people how they can get a hold of you. You know, what's your website? What's your contact information, so that they can set times to meet with you. And then also, you know, I want to be able to, of course, invite you to have a conversation again, because I just love interacting with you.
Sure. In the future, I'd also like to really talk about how adults can benefit from these same properties of jiu-jitsu that can help them transform themselves. Because I really do believe that the tribe aspect of jiu-jitsu is one of the ways that we can benefit those veterans who are dealing with post-traumatic stress. And I always tell people that there's two great times to start jiu-jitsu. One is when you're 4 years old, and the other is today.
I love that.
So as far as reaching me, the best way to find me on the web is at www.mmafc.com. So that's Modern Martial Arts and Family Fitness Center. So the abbreviation MMAFFC.com. And on the website, there's on every single page a way to contact me. So you can click on one of those links and send me an email directly.
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, I love that. Now, there is one quote that you're known for that I just really love. Can you tell me a little bit about that in closing? We'll just close with that.
Yeah, so I think my overall mantra is tap early, tap often, and train tomorrow. That reminds us that in training, once you have gotten to the position where the other person can create a submission, it's too late to worry about the submission. You acknowledge that they've bested you, and you stop the engagement before either one of you gets hurt. And then you get up, dust yourself off, and then you're then physically able to come back the next day and try to fix your mistake. So I try to impart that on all of my students, but especially us older grapplers who aren't kids anymore.
You're so funny. Are there any other statements you want to make in closing before we end our conversation?
No, I just think for people who are in the situation where they are stressed or they're anxious, you have to take a chance on sometimes something new, something foreign, something that might be a little frightening at the outset. And Jiu-Jitsu certainly represents a giant unknown to most folks. And if you take the chance and you step into a school and you allow yourself to get on the mat, you're going to find hours and hours and hours of therapy, usually at the hands of someone else who's trying to choke you. And that seems crazy, but it really does change people's attitudes and perceptions.
I love it. I love it. One other quote that I was trying to get you to say, I love it when you talk about how jiu-jitsu is the physical crucible that forges the friendships. I love that visualization. So I love when you say that. But I look forward to our future conversations. Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm so honored to know you. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.